welcome everyone. Good afternoon. It's great to see so many of you here, especially given kind of the talk about the rail strikes and also that horrific weather out there. Welcome. And look, we've got some fantastic speakers lined up today. But before I come on to that, a little bit just about the purpose of today and a bit about what we're going to be covering. Our lives, literally, they revolve around online. So if I just take myself, for instance, I can book holidays online. I turn my heating on online. And I can also, for instance, the amount of content I consume, it's always consumed online these days. There's even random things. I get more often than I'd actually like these days. I get these WhatsApp messages from my son, normally around lunchtime, because his food cards come out, run out of money at school. So I can even go online and top things like that up as well. And we see this reflected in the Ipsos iris data as well. You see, looking at adults aged 15 or over, on a daily basis, they're consuming almost on average, I think it's about 4 hours of content. And they're online for 4 hours. And that number increases amongst younger age groups. I think it goes up to over 5 hours for 18 to 24s, for instance. So without understanding what people do online, we really are lost, okay? And I think probably that's even more true in the media industry. Because, I mean, look, there's more and more stuff is happening online, more and more is digital, there's new propositions the whole time, etc. And look, Ipsos Iris, it's here to help you with this. Okay, it's an industry-endorsed solution. It's providing you with objective, transparent audience data that helps you understand what actual people are doing online. So it's helping you make smarter decisions, whether that's around growing your brand or your asset, it's selling more advertising space, or it's spending client ad budgets more effectively. So we've got a wealth of data to help you with topics such as this, but also lots of other stuff as well. And this is what you're going to be hearing about this morning. We've got key industry figures talking about the role of online audience data and how they're using this data to drive value within their business. First of all, we're going to hear from Dowds at UKOM. Then we've got Samantha Eales from Mail Metro Media, Dave Carpenter at Goodstuff Communications, and Amanda Wigginton, who's a consultant for the PPA, or as many in the industry know, Amanda as Wig. We're then going to have a panel discussion as well towards the end, and we're going to be joined by Ryan Yule, who's Chief Brand Strategy Officer at Mail Metro Media, who'll offer a slightly different perspective to that of Samantha. Then we'll have a Q&A at the end, so do think as we go through this morning, if there's any questions, do note them down, and we'll be able to take those at the end. So without further ado, delighted to be able to welcome Dowds to the stage.
Thank you, everybody. Let me just try and get my notes standing up where I can read them and they won't fall over. I appreciate everybody making the effort from the shit weather that I came across in. I expected it to be pretty poor today. And that's something else to remind me, I must send out a new picture of myself. There are far more wrinkles and bags under eyes than that fresh-faced young fella. So apologies for that. It's probably the last time you'll see it. I presented last week with Dave Kapar from Ipsos, who's here in the room, at the ASI conference down in Nice. And the title published in advance was At the Coalface. But given the environmental downer on fossil fuels and the feeling of how far we'd come and the number of people involved in the project, I thought there was a slightly better analogy, and it's this one of the biannual festival of Los Castells in Tarragona in Spain. Now, in this analogy, I'm not part of the tower. Instead, I'm one of those guys away from the action in the crowd, shouting, supporting and cheering, but devoid of any real skill or actual input. So although, to be fair, when I'm presenting today, alongside the level of expertise that's going to follow me up on the stage, I feel a little bit more like the kid that you can't quite see at the top wobbling with his helmet on. That festival's been going on since about 1801, so a little bit older than UKOM. But can I take you back to when UKOM endorsed data? Hopefully that's coming up. The first set of UKOM endorsed data was released back in February 2010, and there was a Future of Media seminar, and the great and the good and some others, as you will see, laid out their expectations. Mediatel covered the event in some detail, and the launch of UKOM was deemed to be the end of the beginning. That referred, I think, to the end of the noise of multiple site analytics numbers being thrown around by anybody selling their audience online through scale alone. Hitwise, Omniture, Google Analytics, and many others, they all had, and they still have, their place. But even back then, the market knew that analytics was not audience measurement. And I'm pretty confident that 13 years later, we are not approaching the beginning of the end. Or at least I hope so. The journalist covered the event in detail, and he picked a few highlights, including Simon Dalglish, who saw that UKOM would bring a new dynamic to measurement, and I like to think that he was right, although that's not a word that sits naturally in the world of industry bodies for audience measurement. I like to think we've done something along those lines. Jerry Wright, previously of Unilever and then of ABC, saw it as a sign that the digital industry, as it was called before everything was digital, was growing up. And to a certain extent, he was right too. But on Jerry's timescale, the online industry would now be settled down in its 30s, fully responsible and very sensible. And I think it's fair to say that our wider industry is not fully there yet. Dom Allen of Google foresaw value in UKOM data when it was integrated with other data sets. Well, we did touch points, and for the last 5 or 6 years, we have directly fed into PAMCO to deliver a combined print and digital audience for published media. And I think that's a pretty clear rebuttal for those who say that cross-media or cross-platform or cross-device measurement can't be done. It absolutely can. And then there's this smug idiot who, motivated by a relatively lucrative business model of retargeting in the guise of smart data science and a crude form of analytics under the name of behavioural targeting, he chose to poo-poo the imperative for nationally representative panels for people-based measurement. He claimed that a single monthly monolithic demographic-based data set was of little or no value to anyone. Well, to be fair, in that fact, he'd found an element of truth, albeit accidentally. I promise you, he knew nothing. Now, while demographics still form part of the basis of panel recruitment, based on the establishment survey from a national census, the fact is that the data could not remain monolithic. And so with Ipsos Iris, we've now got 36-hour overnight data, flexible date selection, day parts, day of week TV region, top 100 cities and towns, ethnicity, which is proving very attractive to some of the agencies, lifestyle, media consumption, and external third-party segmentations like the Fresco and Acorn financial segmentation. Many told us that that UKOM may struggle to remain relevant in a programmatic, real-time advertising, always activating world. They are often the same people who still confuse ad campaign measurement with audience measurement, or confuse audience measurement with analytics. This is not analytics. Visits, not deduped, no competitive benchmarking, little distributed content, often unrepresentative panels, sometimes PC only. This is audience measurement. And not just audiences for advertising. We must remember this is not just audiences for advertising. It's for the BBC too. It's not just audiences for publishers. It's for government. It's for the National Health Service. It's for the Revenue and Customs. It's for businesses. Where are young mothers going when they're doing online retail? Which businesses are students spending time with when they're doing online banking? Which sites are being avoided by certain people? This is about how people behave online in the UK. This is not analytics, and it really does pay to be wise. And it's really important when I talk to wider people about how they use data and what they've got, and we use this and we use that. It's really important that we're not putting analytics tomatoes in our audience measurement fruit salad. Forgive the stretched analogy. I'm sure the experts we'll hear from today certainly have far more wisdom than to do that. As everybody knows here, it's getting ever more complicated for everyone. And we're having to ask Ipsos to overcome more obstacles and consider an ever wider field of measurement. We need the site and app owners to lean in, and we're so grateful to those of you that do just that. Dave Kapar referred to it at the ASI as it's a participation game, and it absolutely is. Distributed content, embedded video, going forward, audio, streams or downloads, maybe connected TV, maybe gaming. There's so much more to come. And so that smug idiot was accidentally right in another way too. Online doesn't need a 2010 traditional measurement system. It needs something much, much more than that. Of course, there's always more to be done. But let's hear from those who are making the very best of all the work that's been done to get UKOM and Ipsos to where it is now, trusted and transparent and future ready. First of all, let me invite up Samantha or Sammy Eales from Mail Metro Media.
I'm Sammy. I'm an Insight Manager at Mail Metro Media, and I'll be taking you through today how we're using the Ipsos Iris data to help improve our targetable cohorts across our network. So, I can't talk to you about our targetable cohorts without telling you more about DMGID. Now, DMGID actually only launched 3 weeks ago, so you're one of the first groups of people to hear me present this deck, so wish you luck. So DMGID is our new identity solution. What it's really helping us to do is connect our users and our audience across our entire portfolio. So from everything from Mail Online to My Mail, which is where you can type in little codes to get nectar points, from everything from our Irish brands like Evoke to our Australian brands as well, print and digital, we're able to connect our users using our new ID solution. Now, I have to say it's a unique proposition in market for many different reasons. We have over 90 million IDs globally now, over 40 million or 50 million in the UK every month as well. And it's an incredibly powerful solution because we have over 50% of our traffic coming direct every single month, which means we can get a really rich portfolio about who that user is. And because they're visiting over twice the amount of page views and twice the amount of time spent than any other news brand, we can really learn about who you are, what you're reading, your behaviours, and what other things you're connecting to across our portfolio. We're building these segments and learning about different types of connections using about 330 types of data. So every time you enter a survey, every time you want to opt into a competition, every newsletter you subscribe to, it gets a bit creepy now, pre-warning. Every time you read a page, I learn about where you are, what you're reading, who's that author. Every time you click on a link, whether it's an affiliate or just clicking out, I can understand what you're linking to. Are you trying in the market for something like a new Hoover? You might be going into our kind of home improvement audience, which means we can start to learn more about who you are and the other people that have that same connection as you. Using DMGID, we're able to create 3 different types of cohorts, and Ipsos Iris is helping us with the mass connections over here. We're able to create both authenticated and anonymized solutions. So something like a matched connection would be like an email address. So because we're collecting all the information about you online, and if you've given us your email address at any point, we can start to match that email address with maybe clients' data. because we learn more and more about different audiences and how they connect to different other audiences, we can model out that match data set to learn more about that user and connect and reach more users. And with mass connections, we don't have any email addresses, but we're trying to put cohorts of people together that have the same behaviors. So if you've gone onto an affiliate site, whether you might be clicking on discount codes, if you're in the same category, we'll start putting you all together to learn more about you. So here we've got our kind of example of a matched and modelled connection. So we might have a matched cohort, so something like an email address. Wix, for example, might provide email addresses to us that they might be trying to target. They might be prospects, and we'll match those email addresses to our DMG ID. Where we find those matches, we can either target those users or negatively target those users to make sure that those advertising is appearing in the correct place. If you want to make it a little bit more scalable, you would do something like a modeled solution where we'd find kind of people who look similar to you on site and use our kind of AI models to understand people who are similar to those matched audience. Then we have our mass connections. We have 5 different pillars here. We have now created over 150 different types of these segments, and they're actually greater scale and greater accuracy than we've ever had before, because we've now got 330 different types of data sets pulling into these. Where Ipsos Iris is helping us a lot is in this demographic pillar, which I'll go through in a minute. But we're using kind of behavioural data. So if you're going on sport a lot and maybe finance and automotive content, we might think you're more likely to be male. But we've also got deterministic data in there as well. So every time you enter a survey and opt in and maybe say that you're male, we're putting that in there as well. We're creating pillars based on interest, in market, context, and geo. So moving into how we're using Ipsos Iris, what we're doing is really improving those demographic audiences, especially around things like gender and age. So previously, our male cohort looked something like this. So if you read finance, sport, and automotive, we thought you were a male based on no science whatsoever, just stereotyping. We just had very limited scale. It was based on a low frequency of readership. So someone decided 3 years ago it was 3 page views, never changed ever again. And then we were not getting much inventory based off the back of it. So we really need to work out how we could increase the scale of it, but also increase accuracy, which doesn't normally come hand in hand. So what we've done is we've used Ipsos Iris data to start building out a new type of segment. So you can see here what we're doing instead is to look at what other things are they interested in, but also applying a higher frequency to try and increase that accuracy as well as increase that scale. We're also using new data points such as engagement. So actually, you might not be more likely to be on a sport, but you might be reading it for longer, and therefore that might be indicative of your demographic. And then, as I said, we're now adding in things like survey data as well. So an example of this in action is using males here. This is just a basic index report from Ipsos. So here, this is exactly what we did actually. I ran the Ipsos Iris data against males, and I first just looked at where they're over-indexing in terms of audience and where they also over-indexing in terms of page views. Unsurprisingly, sport across our 3 titles, so iNews, Metric, KDK, and Mail Online, indexed really highly, but things and sections that we'd never thought of before were things like politics, wires, and features. Have really high indexes and indexes on audience and page views, but we never thought about including it in our segment before. Another interesting thing that I thought popped up was this one at the bottom here, which you might be able to see, which is news. So news actually under-indexed for audience, but had a massive over-index for time spent. They're actually spending 19 minutes on there per month. And I have that data in the back end of my DMP as well, so I can start replicating that segment in the back end. So what I end up doing was building a segment like this. I can't tell you the page views based on it, but this is a rough guide. So what we've done is we've now increased the scope of that segment. So it doesn't only include sport, finance, and automotive, but we're including things like wires, features, and politics. I've also increased that page view frequency based on the frequencies, average page view frequencies that Ipsos gave me. I also added in a new engagement section that looked at news and other sections, and they had to read it for over 19 minutes to be determined to be a male. And I also added in the survey data. So what this meant was I had a much better view of my males. I had included 3 times more channels than I've ever done before. I've included engagement metrics that we've never even looked at before. And overall, my entire segment had increased by 70%, which means that there's a lot more revenue we can gain from that male segment now. But what I think is the most important thing is like what we're doing with this data. So now I built this segment, what I've done is I've sent this build of the segment to Ipsos, and they're using the URLs from the kind of paneled level data to replicate that segment on their own side, which is really interesting for us because then they can replicate it and actually look at that panel and say how many people in that segment would be male, which means that we can start to check our own homework and go, actually, is this the right segment? And we can go back to it and improve it in the future. So hopefully it'll be a really good way of getting much better kind of behavioural-based demographic segments moving forward. And I will now pass you over to Dave Carpenter.
So my name's Dave Carpenter. I am head of digital at Goodstuff. I've been there for about 7 years now. And today I want to talk about how us as an agency, how we're using the data, why we think Ipsos Iris helps us drive growth for our client base, but also helps us understand clients a little bit more. And to start with, I just want to talk about us as an agency because I think our legacy, our history, and where we came from is a lot of the reason why we see so much value in the Ipsos Iris data. So born around 18 years ago, we were a pure play planning agency, and the craft of media planning was really what brought us into the market and established our name with our first ever client, Virgin Media. Since then, we brought buying in-house, and as of earlier this year, we have been acquired by Stagwell, the new challenger network out there. In terms of our values, and I think, again, our values are really important to why we see value in Ipsos Iris, but we talk about our key 6 values. We recruit on them, we appraise on them, and we celebrate these values in everything we do. And it's not just about the work we create, but it's the kind of people that we employ. And these values really give us a competitive advantage in market. And I think it's why we love to understand clients and why we deliver media plans and media strategies, I would argue, different to what else is out there in market. Because ultimately we want this. It's our virtuous circle where we have happy people, those happy people deliver great work, and great work delights clients, and we move on and on and on. However, I think we've got a bit of an issue in the industry at the moment, and no more so than when it comes to digital. And for me, I think we've really lost the craft of digital implementation planning. And that's not only because of the kind of being spoon-fed black box data from the likes of Google, Amazon, Meta, Apple, etc. But there's also more contributing factors. So first of all, an over-reliance on third-party segments. I believe that implementation planning digital has got lazy. Programmatic has allowed you to click a box to buy auto-intenders without really understanding who those auto-intenders are and where you can find them. Secondly, I think we misunderstand our clients' businesses. Their websites are their shop front door at the moment, now, and will continue to be. Without understanding how people find your clients' websites, how they navigate those websites, and their overall consumer journey, I think we have issues in really understanding truly what's at the heart of our clients' businesses. Audiences, lost in translation. This comes on to my next point as well, that classic media agency friction between planning and buying. And no more does that existing than in digital, where the craft of media planning still exists, but that is not being translated over to the buying, and you're not getting full through the line media plans as a result. And finally, and for me most pronounced, is the gap between brand and performance. I think as clients take activity in-house and have different structures, you're seeing a widening of the gap between brand and performance, and actually one hand should be feeding the other. And tools like Ipsos Iris really help you unlock how one does feed the other in total. And so we talk about the 3 I's, which are the foundation of our digital approach at Goodstuff. So first of all is integrity. So that's the integrity behind the data. It's the integrity in media planning. It's the integrity of the transparency of the delivery of media plans. Next, we talk about integration, whether we're talking about the gap between paid, owned, and earned, whether we're talking about bridging that gap between brand and performance, or ultimately, and more importantly, in an increasingly digital world, it's that gap between online and offline and helping bridge that gap. And finally, for us, it's about invention. It's what we pride ourselves on. Our mission is to be the world's most inventive media agency, and it's what wins us awards. And a lot of the work that we've done using the data from Ipsos Iris has really helped us build a solid foundation to get the insight that helps us win awards. So it's a bit of a tired old cliche, but we have more access. We have access to more data than ever before, but we need to make sure it's useful, right? We need to have confidence in the data. The validation from UKOM helps us really believe in the Ipsos Iris data. We need to have confidence in our assumptions that we make off the back of the data that we're using. And when the data that you're using is unclear, you create confusion, not only within the agency, but to the client as well, and they can see through that. Accessibility is becoming increasingly important. Agencies and clients and media owners have access to wonderful tech, like Sammy just mentioned with the DMP that they sit there. So being able to access the data in a way that you can transpose it and use it in new and interesting ways is really important. An old mentor of mine always used to say, if you use the same tools in the same way, you're going to get the same results. So what's your competitive edge? And I think accessibility to data and the right smarts behind that really allows you to unlock that value. And finally, understanding. I have a theory that, particularly in digital, people overcomplicate the digital ecosystem, often to justify their own existence. Understanding data and understanding the story that you're trying to tell is key. And I think the accessibility of Ipsos Iris product, the data that you can unlock and what you can then build on top of that is where the useful set of data comes from. So what do we do with Ipsos Iris data? I think that's really important. We believe that it provides a true overview of what we talk about in terms of that consumer journey, and we look at it fourfold. Firstly, the marketplace. What is the size of our client's marketplace? How can we look at the competitors and the audiences that they're generating to their site to really understand how many people are in market at the moment. You can then transpose that with kind of Google search data, keyword data, to really understand what's in play in market. Second is audience. So what's the crossover between your client sites and their competitor sites? How do you understand how people move in market and ultimately get to a conversion? Discovery. Where else is that audience online? What else are they doing during their moments of downtime when they're not actively in market for your client's services? And finally, we pull that all together into what we call consumer journey analysis. So it's taking the Ipsos Iris data, it's taking Google search keyword data to really understand this new model of share of search and share of site visits and look at how that relationship works by sector. Ipsos Iris helps us bridge that gap, as I've mentioned, so the gap between planning and buying, consistent data points, a lot of the TGI segments, a lot of media planning is still based on TGI, so being able to use that for your online audiences is super helpful and allows us to take the great craft of traditional media planning teams and bring it into an online world. In terms of brand performance, James mentioned earlier the local level of detail that allows us to really understand where we can build regional tests and learns, and it allows us to look at the impact of brand activity on search on a real regional level and understand that. And then finally, on and offline, how do audience consume offline media? So James again mentioned TV regions, TV consumption data, looking at that on an online audience, particularly in linear TV. Traditional audiences are moving across and they're becoming increasingly difficult to find. And then finally, we talk about being data guided rather than data driven. I think, again, data driven comes back to that old analogy of same tools, same answers. So we talk about being data driven, and it's got us to some great places. So whether it's with The Guardian and doing a content piece for Metro Bank, or whether it's just proving to our clients about their distribution of social budgets, Ipsos Iris has really allowed us to unlock the potential for clients and drive our own growth. And so that's it from me. I will now hand over to Amanda, who's going to take you through the next part of the deck.
Hello Hello everybody, I am Amanda Wigginton, or Wig, and I am a consultant for the PPA, and what I do for the PPA is really represent magazine publishers and make sure they get what they need from tools like Ipsos Iris in order to do their day-to-day jobs and make money. And so I'm here today really to tell you a little bit about what these magazine publishers are doing in terms of using Ipsos Iris for growth. And these 6 on the screen, and I can see some of you in the room, have helped share some of the things and the ways that they are using that data to inform their sort of business strategies. I think it's important to say actually that this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to PPA members. There's over 200, and I'm not telling you that to pitch to you. The reason I'm telling you that is there's one thing that connects those publishers, and that's the development and creation of trusted content and services for specialist communities. Now, I want to reinforce that point, because actually, if these publishers want to continue to create great products, compelling content, drive and grow engaged audiences, and deliver outcomes to advertisers, everything starts with your consumer. And that's where Ipsos Iris comes in. So what did those publishers tell me in terms of where Iris can add value? Well, there are 4 key areas, really. I can put it into 4 buckets. It's content strategy and development. I'm realising that I can't hear. I'm going to take the mic off, but I don't know whether the guy's there, so I'm just going to try and take it off. I don't think I can. There you go. Oh, I felt a bit like Madonna. Right, so it's 4 buckets: content strategy and development, audience understanding, measuring performance, and business strategy. And everything that everybody told me sort of fell back to these sort of 4 areas. So I'd just like to walk you through a lot of examples of how the data is used across those publishers, just so that it gives you a taste for all of the data. So let's start with pinpointing key consumer and content trends. Oh, I feel like I can point now as well. So 36.7 million people consume online magazine content. That's about 2/3 of the internet population. That's a lot of people and a lot of content. Unfortunately, Ipsos Iris breaks that down into really nice categories and segments that we can look at a little bit closely. So what I've done here is I've just looked at audience by month across the last year, and instantly you can start to see some trends. So you can see in yellow on the food and beverages some Xmas food planning happening, and then on the purple line, which is home and gardening, spring I hear is a key time for planting. It's not really my specialist subject, but you can see a slight peak in traffic. What you can also start to see is that food and beverages and home and garden are on sort of a growth trajectory. So what you're starting to do is use Ipsos Iris to sort of get a deeper understanding of your content. Now, I'm not saying that content teams aren't using internal analytics data to do this. What Iris is there to do is give you a much broader view. So it's enhancing what you already know from a competitor and a market perspective. So you can take it one step further and look at engagement. So same graph, but this time with time spent, or average time spent per person. And I like this chart because there's two big red spikes. And that is around people's hobbies, or passions, as we call them at the PPA. And what you can see is around Easter and the summer holidays, when people have more time, surprisingly, they spend more time with their passions. So not rocket science, but I think what I started to do just from these 2 slides was realise actually that just with that sort of very top line data, that you can use Ipsos Iris actually to inform your business strategy. And actually, when I spoke to publishers, these were just a couple of areas where publishers are using the data. So those spikes in content are basically ways that you can monetize your audiences, grow engagement, and that's how the publishers are seeing it. So they're using the data to create new audiences and markets for M&A and for product development. Now, I can't share the details of what they're doing because that would be commercially sensitive. But we know that we can use Iris data to sort of help inform that. So a couple of examples on M&A side, you can create proxy audiences. So you can, if you're consolidating or you're exiting a market, or if you just want to size the audience of a market, you can use it to directly inform. And again, I'm not saying that we're not using internal analytics tools to do this. What Iris is doing, I'm going to use that word enhance again, is giving you that extra enhancement so you can look at it from a market and also from a competitor perspective. So what else can I tell you? Now I'm going to move to food. And we're going to talk about identifying growth opportunities. And I'm not talking about my waistline here. It's a little joke. So food is a really important category. You probably saw on that first slide that the yellow line is way above. In September, 31.2 million people consumed some sort of food online, and that's about 63% of the UK population. So on average, people are spending 19 minutes per person. I'm sure they spend a lot more time thinking about food than looking at it, but I think instantly what you start to see is actually you can put a value on the size of the prize, and that picks up actually on some of the stuff that Sammy and Dave were saying before me. But let me just show you how you can use an example. And Christmas is 46 days away. This is an example from last Christmas, actually. What I've done is I've just plotted audience day by day in December. And we can see these amazing food moments. So weekends, we see peaks in consumption of food content. Christmas Eve goes mental, and there is a 28% increase in average time spent. And then we have this sort of food coma on Boxing Day, where nobody wants to look at anything to do with food, but then we get back to sort of average levels. So instantly you get a snapshot of what people are sort of doing and when. And, you know, suddenly I thought, what if you could do this for like reviews on Black Friday and, you know, TV viewing and all of those things? And actually you can. So you can look at all of these sectors day by day, and it doesn't stop there. Right place, right time. You can also look at it in terms of day parts. So I've taken food again, and I've broken it down by time of day. And you can see that planning for meals, the green line or turquoise line, mostly happens in the morning and afternoon. And actually, that doesn't surprise me, because from a lot of research I've done over the years, most meal planning is done the morning before. And actually, what you can see on Christmas Day is it's definitely food before presents. So people are planning their food before they're opening the presents. Not much midnight snacking, which is the red line. But what you do see on Christmas Eve is that last-minute panic. Or maybe they're just trying to maximise time in bed on Christmas Day. Who knows? But all of this allows you to more effectively target your audiences, you know, giving you more chances to grow your audiences and make money. So on that targeting audiences, I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but obviously a lot of the publishers, the magazine publishers, are using it for ad sales, and I thought what really struck me as I was sort of pulling this deck together is the opportunity to use the different tools that Iris have. So things like exclusive audience, audience synergy, and cross usage reports. All of this shows the incremental value. So if we go back to the sort of growth opportunity and the size of the prize, it allows you to prove that. So what else can I tell you? Well, next level profile data. Now you're all going to go, what the hell is she doing? She's just put a demographic side up there. But this is not just any demographics. This is Ipsos Iris demographics. And they are the Marks and Spencers of demographic data. For any of you who've used analytics data, it's incredibly frustrating in terms of the sort of representation, but also the sort of depth. You can only go to a certain level. And so what Iris allows you to do actually is look at all of these things. So whether it's age or social grade, and you can combine it. You can go down to city level on regions. So it just keeps going deeper and deeper. But the other thing that's really good is you can also look at online magazine consumption versus offline magazine consumption, which starts to give you a sense of the incremental value that, you know, digital entities can add to schedules. And then you can do things like this. Very simple market map, but it is the starting point for all audience development and growth strategies. This is how you inform your market positioning and market growth strategy. And all I've done is used the index ABC across by 35 plus, just so that we can see the sort of relative positioning. And some publishers take that even further and start to benchmarking their competitors. In fact, I'd probably say this is the slide that most CEOs see in their board reports and probably the most used slide. And it's very simple. It's looking at audience, percentage change versus the same time last year, and the audience trends. And what it does is it gives that C-suite instant visibility on what's happening in the market. And it allows them to ask those really difficult questions about why traffic was up and why traffic was down. So, and some take it even further and establish KPIs. We often use KPIs using internal analytics data. But again, another thing, Iris allows you to look at that from a market perspective. So I've just put here average minutes per person, average page views, device type, and audience share, just to give you a sense of the sort of KPIs that you can use the data to produce. And then 2 slides just to finish up. I think what strikes me is that Iris is also talking in the language that we already use on the marketing side. So this is just a profile on the CACI Acorn segments. That's used already a lot in marketing to identify prospects and understand consumers. And now with Iris, you can use it and directly integrating it into your marketing activities. And if you combine that with the day-by-day analysis and the time of day analysis, it gives you much, much richer insight in order to plan those campaigns. And then finally, growing your audience. I've used Fresco here, which is a financial segmentation. I've just profiled the food magazine media sector and focused in actually on those bubbles that are key to that sector. So if you wanted, for example, to target high-income professionals, you can obviously use Iris to find out where else they are online, and that can directly inform your search, your social, and your marketing sort of strategies. So really, I suppose Iris, I suppose what the data shows is that it is integral to all magazine publishers' strategic toolkit. It's not a tool that we're using alone, and as that word I keep using in terms of enrichment is a key one, because it's used in association with all of the other stuff that we have. It allows them to benchmark performance versus the competition, something so simple, but actually something that we shouldn't dismiss. And importantly, it allows you to identify opportunities for growth. That's me.
So, yeah, it's really interesting, I think, to hear from our subscribers how we're seeing Iris being put into practice. So it adds value. It's adding value to their businesses. I think I was keen to kind of synthesize a bit just to start with some of the really kind of interesting things that we heard. I think from Sammy, it's really fascinating to hear how Ipsos Iris is being used to add value into those behavioural segments. And it's directly increasing the audience. I think there's that figure of plus 70% there. And it's directly hitting the bottom line. And then we've heard from Dave about this very, very strong message there about the craft of implementation planning, how Iris is being used with search data there. Then Wiggs talked a lot about kind of different ways in which the data can be used. I love the way that it kind of looks across category data. We go into time, then we go into day data, and then it goes into day parts as well. So it's all about that right time, the right moment, which helps hit the bottom line as well. I love that analogy about Ipsos Iris is the M&S of audience data, maybe something for our marketing team. And another analogy I really enjoyed was Ian's about the fruit salad there and what's in that. But I think the web analytics data was something certainly that it came out as a common element. I think it was in one way or another, it was mentioned in 3 out of 4 of those presentations that we've seen. And I think it's something that I'd like to lead into. There is a lot of data out there in market. I remember when I first started, there was in the media industry, there's probably TGI and obviously all the JIT currencies. But now there's lots more. There's all the web analytics data I've referenced. There's things like Global Web Index, there's SimilarWeb, etc. We can go on and on. And I think that the first question that I'd like to touch on or area to discuss is around how do we see Iris fitting in with all these other solutions that are out there in the online space. And first of all, I'd quite like to come to Ian from an industry perspective on this.
Well, probably the least important one to speak to, but particularly with everyone else saying we use all these ingredients. My message has always been at UKOM that data is not a zero-sum game. I've never said you must only use UKOM data. It's absolutely critical that's seen. My message of throwing it in the same bowl and mixing it together and presenting one as the other, that's my challenge. And I do hear people say, oh yeah, we use analytics tools to do that. And I think, do you really? Because I'm not really sure you can do, as these guys have shown, what you can do with Iris with analytics. Absolutely not a zero-sum game. UKOM, I really like Dave's approach. I've always seen UKOM data as a foundation of transparent, independent, trusted industry data on which everybody, each agency, should absolutely build their clever stuff through their own proprietary systems or what have you. As long as you know the sources and the value and the robustness and the accuracy of the other data that's coming in and being built on top. And I think along the line, some of that has been lost up till now. So I hope my wisdom and knowledge and analogy doesn't mean the analytics has no worth. It absolutely does, but you just have to know what it is you're using and when. And the examples these guys gave was all absolutely clear of the purpose and the value of each of what they're using, and that's critical.
No, it's a really nice segue into kind of how Sammy talked about how they've been using Ipsos Iris and behavioural data together with Mail Metro Media to complement one another. Ryan, I mean, Sammy's talked a lot about this enriching of behavioural data. You must have lots of tools at Mail Metro Media, I'm imagining, at your fingertips. How does Iris fit in with these other solutions that you've got?
Yeah, so I thought about this a lot, and I would say, firstly, for me and Sammy and the rest of the team, Ipsos Iris is the go-to for the audience measurement and deduped audience measurement across all of our digital properties. And actually, I've just spent the last week doing a project for our editorial teams to look at all of the different touch points that we have and then looking at their age and gender demographics and what the duplication is between print and digital, but also our app and also the BBC app. So how many people use the Daily Mail app, but then also go on the BBC app and use it on a monthly basis. And that stuff's really important because when you're looking at internal analytics, which many of our teams, that's where it's embedded, especially with kind of editorial, and they've been there for a long time, they definitely have a place, but then you need to understand, but who are these people? Not just, oh, that article did really well, 4 page views. Who read it? What were those people? And I think when you start to rely, I think if you only rely on the platform data that maybe is coming from the Google Analytics tool, often that and Ipsos Iris data do not align. And I would very much like to trust the Ipsos Iris data because I know it comes with a huge and rigorous methodology that we're all involved in. So I think as long as you consider what each tool is good for, and I would say I spend fundamentally most of my working life explaining to people what the different tools do and which one does what and which one does the other, and try to get people to avoid the fallacy of going, well, I want the biggest number. Of course, the Google Analytics number that shows unique browsers is the biggest, but that's not your dedupe reach across all of your domains, and you can't add them all together to get an even bigger number. So that, I think, is a really important point, and you just need more champions in the industry explaining in each of these different things, which I think probably all of us are, why it's really useful.
Wait, does that chime with you in the...
Yeah, he's just bloody said it all, hasn't he? Leave some for us. But no, I'd echo everything that Ryan said in terms of I think is it the sum is greater than all of the individual parts. And I'm going to go back to ease, which is that Iris is there, I think, with those other tools to sort of enhance, enrich and evaluate. And I think it does such an important job in all of those areas. And I think sometimes the reliance on internal analytics, and I saw this when I worked on the publishing side, it can keep things quite blinkered. And actually what Iris is doing is it's just broadening people's sort of view and thinking about sort of your role in the whole digital ecosystem. So that's sort of what I'd add, but I completely agree with Ryan.
Dave, you were talking about a combination of looking at Iris data, search data. I mean, how does Iris fit in good stuff with these other tools that you're using?
Yeah, for me, it came to life when Amanda was presenting. I think it's a storytelling tool, right? So the unique stories you were able to tell about what's happening on Boxing Day and no one wants to look at food. I think you can tell that story about your client's business and what's happening. And I think it's a sandbox, yeah? If we have people that are intrigued by the data, inquisitive about what they can find out, it's a sandbox in which you can build from. And I think telling, from a media agency point of view, telling your clients stuff that they don't know about their own customers becomes really exciting and adds loads of value. So, and like I mentioned before, I think we all have the tools and the tech, whereas once upon a time, fusing data sets or even just looking at crossover was a really laborious process. I think we have the tech and tools available to us and the talent across the industry to really look at disparate data sets and pull together those stories that are interesting for clients.
We've talked a little bit about, I suppose, there are different data sets out there, there's different data points, there's methods that bring these up. I mean, Iris is this, it's a subjective, transparent data source that we've got there. It's something that I quite often toy with, and Ian, I wanted to replicate what Ian said, that look, there's lots of data out there. I'm not saying just use Ipsos Iris, certainly don't. It's different data sources pulled together that bring interesting insights and add richness to data sources. But is there a case, like there are in other media channels, for instance, in TV and radio, where we've got both the buy and the sell side singing off the same hymn sheet, using one solution that underpins the plan, the buy and the sell, I suppose. Dave, maybe stick with you on that from an agency perspective.
It's a nice dream. And look, that's easy, but the world doesn't work like that anymore. And I think increasingly those tools are coming against challenges where everything becomes a bit more digital and audiences are moving around. So yes, it would be lovely to have something like that, but I just don't see it being realistic. And I think we'll probably come on to talk about and Ian kind of mentioned it in terms of what's coming next. But as everything becomes more digital, what sits where, and that's both in agency structure, but in our reporting tech and tools that we have, it's becoming increasingly difficult to navigate.
It might have been easier if when UKOM started, and if it was the same as when UKOM started, which is we were talking about audiences for static text and pictures on websites on PCs. If we were planning and trading that, we could probably use this as a planning and trading, but it's text and static pictures and video and audio on desktops and tablets and smartphones and iOS and Android and in-app and the formats and the markets have just got so complex. I don't think we should shy away from talking about UKOM as a planning currency, and you know, I'd be very comfortable with that, with a lot more work to do because it's ever changing. But as a trading currency, again, trading currencies tend to talk about advertising, and this comes back to me of this distinction between audience measurement and ad campaign measurement. We must be very careful what we're talking about. In fact, I'm going to go off tack ever so slightly. Audience is an interesting one, because you talk about what your clients' audiences are, but if you're talking to a bank doesn't have audience, it just has customers, doesn't it? It just has people. And often when we're talking about audiences, we tend to focus on media consumption, where actually, exactly as an agency user, is what are my clients' customers doing, and where have they not got customers, and where have other people got customers? And we had this conversation at an AOP the other day, and I said, what do we call it? And it's people. It's people measurement. It's what are people doing? And yeah, we must be careful not to get hung up on the word of audience, because you lose some of the value to agencies of what we're measuring.
Yeah, it's certainly a conversation we've had within Ipsos when you're looking at speaking to other parts of Ipsos about how this data can be used for their clients. That are more often than not, it's advertisers. They use a different language to media.
So going back to your question about the buy side, sell side, I think fundamentally, yes, it would be lovely if everyone sung from the same hymn sheet and everyone was involved and funding it to the right level. But I would stress that as publishers in the room, we've spent an incredible amount of time making sure our sites are tagged. We spend so much time making sure our hierarchies are correct, that you have as much detail about our domains and our brands. So if you want to know what our audiences of our football channel is versus our food channel for your planning purposes, it's all there. And obviously we want it to be as accurate as possible for ourselves so that we can make strategic decisions internally, but we want it accurate for the planning community, because we know that as third party cookies deprecate and people can't rely just on clicking a box in a programmatic vendor that they're going to buy mails / whatever, you would hope that the industry starts moving back to, let's find this audience, where do they over-index? Yeah. Or that might help you decide what types of context do those people over-index, and then you could use contextual targeting as a proxy for behavioural targeting where it doesn't exist in as ready. But obviously come to publishers, we have data, we have audiences, and it's all first party and GDPR compliant, so please do come.
So I was just going to add to that, because I think there's a big job that we actually have to do as publishers, actually. And I think the most eye-opening thing of talking to what the magazine media sort of publishers were doing and starting to tell those stories is we need to showcase more of that amazing insight, because actually we're the ones that can make it integral to that planning conversation by sharing that data. And so I think, yes, it's an ideal world, but I think we have a responsibility too to share how we're using that data, because that's what gets clients excited too, isn't it? So so that's the sort of only thing I would add. We have a responsibility.
I may ask one more question, and it's kind of we've talked a bit about the here and now, how data is being used today. We've seen a lot of that, but I mean, looking ahead a bit, okay? How, if we're here this time next year, 12 months time, what would be the one thing that you'd want to see in Iris? Bearing in mind we've got the full development team, research team, tech team in the audience here. And I'm going to start with Wigan. Come along this way.
Quick. I've got to be quick then. Right, customer journey mapping is my wish. That starts with source and loss, she says. We need it. So I think as soon as you have something like that, it becomes a game changer for product teams and product development teams. So slightly outside of the ad space, still really important, but it becomes a game changer.
Dave can have two. He can have mine. It's important that we hear what agencies want.
I want to see connected TV. I think Netflix coming in this month is the biggest fundamental shift in what we're seeing in AV since Sky. And that's huge for where budgets are going, how audiences are moving, but it's still an area that we don't have enough clarity over. So for me, CTV.
And for me, if anyone knows me, it's transparency. And the reason for this is because actually my editorial teams and me and Sammy as well, when we were looking at this data, we want to know the audiences that are coming from Twitter. We want to know the audiences that are consuming our content on Snapchat, on TikTok, on all of these things. Be it, as I may, some of those tools aren't yet embedded in Ipsos, but we hopefully are going to have them in the future. But if I can start to understand the domain profile versus the types of audiences that my editorial teams are garnering through all of these different social platforms, that for me, with the source and loss, because that was my other one, is massively game changing, because we can then start to know we need to focus more on that channel to then get the 18 to 24s that don't exist on our domains. As an example, a case in point, we looked at Apple News. So Mail Online isn't in Apple News in the UK, we are in US and Australia. And I was looking at different other brands, so like Metro is. We wanted to understand what was the duplication between the Apple News audience versus the Metro domain, and actually how many of them were new. And we found out it was more likely to be 18 to 34 and more likely to be female. So you're getting a new audience into Metro that never would have read it and never would have visited the domain. That's why for me it's like transparency is key.
Well, as Dave only took one, I will take mine. I'll put it in probably Dave Kapar's words of what does Ian and UKOM want. We probably want the frickin' moon on a stick, don't we, Dave? Is that if Dave said there was only one thing? A big step for us is the integration of video, or the inclusion of video, which beta data starts this month. I applaud Ipsos for all the work they've done aligning with YouTube and to get the server-to-server data for YouTube in. And to be fair to Ipsos, it is now entirely on the desks of Google to sign it off, and we're pretty much ready to go with that. CTV is a very interesting one. It would be the biggest step for us, because up till now, we've been very clear it's IP delivered content on desktop, tablet, smartphones. That has been our arena. Interestingly, I don't think I'm breaking any confidences in saying that the YouTube integration alongside that in parallel is work that Ipsos are doing for YouTube around CTV. Whether that's a stepping stone in for us, I don't know, but it's certainly something that more and more people are asking for. Netflix is a big step. Whether it's big enough to cover everything else that's involved in it, I don't know. But there's certainly plenty to be getting on with.
Yeah, certainly if I had £1 for every time CTV comes up, the answer to that is something's a hot topic. But yeah, transparency feeds into source loss. Absolutely. That's noted. Have we got time maybe for... Yeah, not it. So, look, thank you. Really valuable discussion there. Appreciate the input. I'd like to open it up to any questions in the room. I think we've probably got time for a couple. It's something, while you have a thing, I can pose one. Something we quite often get asked is, we've talked quite a lot around developments just now. How do you ensure that Iris remains future ready? And I suppose it goes back to when we developed Iris, we worked with the industry on it throughout 2020. I think over 150 people involved from about 60 different organisations. And it's really important that we keep connected with the industry and speak to people to understand what is going on in the industry, what are the latest trends, where's the industry moving, etc. And through doing this and understanding from, like we've just heard today, where people want to see either solution move to, that's how we know how to keep it future ready.
Well, just... from ASI last week, which I think it was about 45, nearly 50 presentations over 3 days globally from media audience measurement organisations around the world. The really interesting thing for me was that 3 or 4 years ago, the future was it can't be panels because panels can't cope with the amount of fragmentation. There has to be another way. It was pretty much unanimous at ASI last week that people panels remain absolutely fundamental to what we need to do in audience measurement. And there's lots of very smart stuff being done around expanding those people panels into synthetic panels and making it more representative through scale. But it was really, really noticeable that nobody in a room that was talking entirely about the future said, we need to get rid of panels. It was and the single source panel of Iris and the multi-device nature of it, so 10,000 people, 25,000 devices that you can then scale up, is absolutely critical to the decision we made to pick Iris, and it makes it more integratable with every other data set that everyone has used. So that stays critical.
I thought that was fantastic, by the way. Some real eye-opening stuff presented there, so very much appreciated.
Could you say who you are and where you're from, please?
No, I'm not going to say that. I'm a secret agent. So my name's Ian Jacob. I'm involved with UKOM. So, but I had a thought, and it really came from Wig, if I may call you that. That is this a way, do you think, of helping us re-enter the boardroom as a marketing community and a product community and a media community? Because if the slides you put up, which showed, you said, in fact, were the interesting slides to the CEO and the CFO, because they describe the business's position in the broader internet sphere, which every business is involved with, obviously, then do you think we can do more to get this into the boardroom, this sort of data into the boardroom, to give ourselves... Because what immediately struck me, and I'm involved with private equity quite a lot, so I get involved in that sort of side of the business, is that some of the data you were putting up there, which was talking about addressable markets and the size of addressable markets, was absolute gold dust. So can we use that more, do you think?
Definitely. So I know, having worked in a company that was owned, private equity, all of those slides were fundamental to those conversations. And I think the reason they are so fundamental is because it gives you instant visibility. And I think from a digital perspective, you're sort of measuring yourself against yourself all of the time. And it just changes the conversation. And all those things we take for granted in print and in TV and in radio, what you can sort of harness the data and allow it to tell a story. That one slide, which I've discussed with publishers, but also just generally from my own experience, was probably the most influential slide from a market perspective. And I think generally our focus is always on it as an ad and planning and trading tool, and that's not a bad thing whatsoever. But it is about kind of how you use it in different parts of the business and in wider parts of the business, because there is a lot of use there. It's just often it's hidden, and it's showcasing that really.
I would just add these slides, that not necessarily the slides that Sammy showed, but the Ipsos Iris data gets in our board packs all the time. So I send emails on the new video data that's obviously still embargoed to all of my CEOs, which then gets sent to our chairman. So the data is in our business certainly being seen by the very top, because when it came to like the Queen's death and those kind of like 20 days that it was, they were so interested in who had won, who had lost. And you can use Systric data to look at search visibility, but with the Ipsos Iris data, we'll be able to showing that Daily Mail performed so well in terms of engagement. So we held our engagement over the whole period of the Queen's funeral, and that wasn't shown in all publishers, and that was just a really interesting thing for our editorial team to see. And that goes all the way to the top. So it definitely is used.
I think it would be really interesting to see a session sort of similar to what Wiggy showed us, stories and visualization from different types of media owners and agencies, so that people can see the stories that come out of the data, because that really brings the data to life, seeing it and how it's been used.
We'll take it. I'd love to round it up, but it's interesting you say it, because some of that stuff I haven't seen before either, and it just brings it to life. Ian talking about the boardroom, Julie does a fair few insight pieces, and one that really struck me she did a couple of months ago was about students and online banking. And I guarantee if we sent the chart, and it basically showed the engagement, where students or 18 to 24-year-olds in full-time education, so I'm calling them students, are spending their time online in the online banking segment. And I guarantee if you were any of the major high street banks and you saw how far ahead Monzo and Revolut are of where you are, you'd shit yourself. and I bet there's internal analytics that says, we've got more 18-24 students this year than we had last year, and we've got more, and we've done a little bit of research. If you saw the massive gap between these two banks in terms of engagement, it probably wouldn't make it into the boardroom because somebody would get fired. And that really, really struck me. And there's so much more of that. And that's not just a story, it's a snapshot that makes you go, flipping heck. But I would love to. We really would love to.
I think we're probably at about time now. But look, I don't want to hold people from drinks downstairs any longer. We'll all be around if you've got any more questions. A big thank you to the panelists and speakers. I'd also like to take this opportunity, just say it's the first time really, because of the pandemic, that we've seen a lot of people face to face. I can see a lot of very familiar faces in the audience, a lot of subscribers to the data. And I'd just like to thank everyone for their continued contribution that make Ipsos Iris what it is and your ongoing support into it. Without further ado, just like to say thank you. Enjoy the drinks.